Today I am talking about the big HR Big Meet, though. You can see the QR code over here. The HR Big Meet is the event that I run. It's happening on the 16th of May in London this year. And I'm going to be doing some lives over the next 10 weeks, is it, I think, leading up to the event. We've already met Faye Wallace, who is our headline speaker for the year. And I've got more of those booked in so you can get to meet the rest of the speaking team and the panelists, and excitingly, hopefully, the workshop hosts that I am finalising this week. Keep everything crossed for me because they are great topics. Today's live, though, I am chatting to someone who came along to the event last year. So she's coming along to share her experiences of what it's like to actually attend this thing rather than speak at it. Without further ado, please let me introduce you to, if everything works, the fabulous Alison.
Hello. Here I am.
Alison, thank you so much for giving some of your time to come and talk about the HR Big Meet. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, what attracted you to the HR Big Meet when you saw it being promoted last year?
Yeah, so I think when I first saw that the big meet was happening, I think it was because Emma, I'd found you on TikTok
Oh.
before LinkedIn, which probably tells you a bit about what I was doing in the business social space. Like I was much more on TikTok than I was on LinkedIn. And then I'd started getting more into LinkedIn and I'd found you on LinkedIn and then saw about the big meet. And I'd been on maternity leave for 6 months. I was coming to the end of my maternity leave and I was thinking about what I was going to do when I got back into my role, and lots of things were changing. And I had started having a look at events and things like that. And then when this one cropped up, I just thought, oh, that one looks different. That's not something I've done before. And I liked that it was specifically for women. I liked the celebrating women in business element of it. And it, to be honest, just looked really fun and exciting, different to anything that I'd seen before. So I thought, yeah, let's go for it. And it actually ended up being literally, I think maybe week 2 of when I was back from maternity leave. So it's
Yeah.
like, this is how I'm going to get my brain back into HR mode after being in baby mode for 6 months.
Gosh, yeah, 2 weeks in and coming along to that event as well. Amazing. And I think if it's all right, I'm gonna stick for a minute on the fact that it's a women only event, because for some people that will be like a bit of a turn off because they'll be like, why would I do that? And I had the feedback last year actually that in one of the conversations, which was like, if you really want to promote equality or maybe promote diversity in the HR profession, then the event should be open to men. And I was like, that kind of misses the point from my perspective of why it's women only. So I'd be interested to know from your perspective, like, what was it about it being a women only event that kind of appealed to you?
Yeah, I think it's funny, isn't it, when we talk about diversity in HR, because actually I think there's probably much more women in HR than there are men in HR. So it's probably not the more diverse angle. However, in the broader spectrum of business and networking and putting yourself out there, I think that part is harder for women to do. And I speak to a lot more women that find that a struggle than I do men.
Yeah.
And also for me, I have been in male dominated industries and businesses for most of my career. So although in HR there's a lot of other women, at the time I was the only woman on a senior management team, for instance. So there's an opportunity for me to go and meet with other senior women in business in a space where we have that little bit of safety around being a woman and being a woman in a senior role and maternity leave. It's something that only women really understand because only
Yes.
come back from maternity leave, and that daunting element of things, that sort of appealed to me really, and just having that different space. I just thought it was, yeah, it just was something that I hadn't done before, so I thought it would be interesting.
Yes, and you're so right. I think HR is a predominantly female profession, mostly women, and even at the top levels. Actually, I'm thinking of CIPD data. I can't get my teeth in to say that. That shows that there are less men still at the top levels of HR, but even though there are less men, they're still paid more.
Mhm.
than the women who hold the senior roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, and you're so right in the context of what our profession might be female dominated, but the general world of business, trying to operate as a woman in HR within a male dominated, normally male dominated senior leadership team, that does tend to be challenging, and that comes out all the time in the women that I talk to, the women that I coach. It's also come out, people who've bought tickets this year, we've been asking everyone, what are your biggest frustrations? And getting senior management buy-in is like the top one
Yeah.
coming out as a concern.
Yeah.
And I have a theory that if we were a male-dominated industry, we might not have as many challenges as we do. It's just a theory. I'm not saying it's fact. I'd love to do some research on that. But yes, so thank you for letting me know that. So you thought it looked different. You were returning from maternity leave, like how hard is that to get your head back into the game when you come back from that? Oh my God. And so how was the HR Big Meet different to other things that you'd been to?
Yeah, I think there was just so much of a different energy that I actually don't think, unless you've been in that room, I'm not actually sure I can describe it, to be honest. And I think there'll be when if people are watching this or they watch it later, that are also people who were in that room over the last couple of years, it is a completely different energy than anything I've ever been to. And it's not just because we're jumping around and having a dance or all of these things. It's just the energy in the room. I think that people are there because they've taken that day to invest in themselves and taken that day to meet other people who are doing the same. And it's not a lot of the time, I think people can be put off by networking because they think, I'm going to go to this event and loads of people are just going to sell something to me, or they're going to talk to me about something that their business is doing that I don't really want to talk about. And there was none of that. It was just a lot of people in a room wanting to know about each other and wanting to chat and wanting to hear what was going on in each other's worlds, sort of thing. And actually, I think what was really nice was the amount of conversations that I had through the day of, "Oh, I'm finding this really difficult," or "This has been a pain in the neck for my business at the moment." And the amount of people that said, "Oh, absolutely, we're struggling with that as well. We're struggling to retain the right people.
Mm,
We're struggling with salary. We're struggling with senior leadership buy-in." All of these things, it makes you feel so much less alone, really. And I
yeah.
think at the time I was in a standalone head of people role, so I was the only internal HR hire in the business, the only woman on the senior management team, the youngest person on the senior management team. So it was a big change for me going back into that world. And after having my baby, I was like, everything has already shifted. And now I'm thinking, oh God, what's happening? And I was on the brink actually at that point of thinking I was going to go independent and change in my role a bit, because again, I'd had that reflective time when I was off, thinking maybe I've come to the end of this role, maybe I want to do something different. And the amount of support and energy in that room and in the networking, like the after party when we went for drinks and nibbles after, was just so lovely. Because as I started talking about to people like, oh, I'm thinking I'm going to do these things, I'm going to go independent, I was almost nervous to say it, because I was thinking people are going to look at me and think, why are you going independent? Like you're not experienced enough for it, or all of these things that were my horrible voice in my head. And I got none of that. Not one person said things like that to me. In fact, there were people that said the exact opposite of how amazing it was that I was doing it. And the fact that I'd come from an operational background was really good and really gave me tangible advice that actually I walked away from that day thinking, no, I can go and do this, and I should believe in myself. And it was that feeling in that room. I think that's what I've never had, that a networking event or conference or any kind, really.
That's so lovely because I never experienced that too. That's one of the things that the HR Big Meet exists for, because I never had that genuine connection at networking events.
Yeah.
It would feel, I don't know, it'd feel really competitive, and it would feel like, I don't know, I always walked away thinking, I'm not doing all that exciting stuff that they're all talking about from stage, or that they're, and maybe that was my own internal critic or whatever, still my truth, still my reality.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased that you experienced something different too, that kind of gave you the confidence to be like, yeah, I could do this thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
You talk about the energy, and I guess in the marketing of the big meet, we play on that energy quite heavily because it is so different. But I'm sensing, I don't know, intuitive, whether there's any truth to it or not, or again, my own internal thoughts around it, that might also be intimidating for people to see that level of kind of energy and, oh, am I going to be expected to dance around and all of that kind of thing? What would you say to people who might be watching it and being like, A, this is so different, I feel intimidated by it, or some version of that. And B, I can't take the time out for myself because I feel that's different about the big meet as well, is that it's not focused on the technical. I make a joke about it, don't I? Come and learn about TUPE. You're not going to learn about TUPE at the big meet. Absolutely not. But that, and it's really, it can be hard for people to invest time, money themselves
Hmm.
coming along to something which doesn't then have a business outcome. Like what would you say to that?
I think, I suppose what I would say is it's maybe shifting our perspectives of what a business outcome is, because just because you don't get a piece of paper, or you don't get a, I've done a workshop on two and I now know how to do two, which you don't, by the way. If you've done a workshop on two, like, that's not
No
enough.
one knows.
Nobody knows about TV, and I've done a lot of TV, and I still, it's not,
No
you're
clue.
not, it's still not going to be a fix. I think um we have to shift that perspective, because actually what I got out of the big meet is when people are stood on a stage talking to you about their experiences. One, I remember all of those people that I listened to that day, and I've now connected with them on LinkedIn, and I've seen what they've done since, and I remember what they do, and it make, you never know when you might use those people. For starters, whether it's their content, they might teach you something new later down the line, or you might need their services, or they might be in a business where you want to go and get a job. Who
Mm.
knows? The world is so small. And I think it's maybe shifting that a bit and thinking what you're getting out of it is what you will put into it. And yes, there are elements where we'll stand in a big room and we'll dance around to Lily Allen. And don't get me wrong, probably 95% of people in that room are cringing at themselves for doing that. But who's it hurting? Like, you go into an event where you're learning something, you're meeting nice people, and actually it doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't need to be you sat there with a notepad and not talking to anyone and writing down what you've, and then you going back to your boss and going, oh, this is what I got out of this event. It's a day for you to go and learn from other people like you in your industry, and just have fun with it and enjoy it and
Yeah.
be yourself. And I don't think there's any harm in that. I think sometimes we see these conferences as, I'm going to a big fancy conference, and therefore it shouldn't be fun, which is a
Yes.
bit crazy, really. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of a laugh with it as well.
No, and I think there's room for both, isn't there? There's who says that professional has to be boring, and like we wrote a post about it today. We put on such a mask, such a front as HR professionals. It's nice to just go into a space and be able to be yourself, like to
Yeah.
whatever level of comfort. You don't have to dance. There's no rule that says you have to be involved in that. There were people who didn't do that last time, and no one was like looking at them thinking, why aren't you? It's just
No.
coming along and doing things to the comfort level that you feel that you want to, which is good, right? Who says, again, fun shouldn't be forced. So just like our version of fun is one thing doesn't mean that you have to come and do that
I
too.
loved as well, actually, just thinking about that, because I'll forget to tell you,
Yeah.
you had a quiet space set up like a couple of times through the day. Obviously, it was the first time I'd done anything like that in probably over a year, and I
Yeah.
hadn't even been at work for 6 months. So there was a couple of times through the day where I thought, oh, I just need a minute. And I went and sat and ate lunch on my own and just had a cup of tea and just had 15 minutes to myself. And there's opportunities to do that. So I think it's important to say that it is a busy day and it's loud and there's lots of people, like just like any networking event. But what you, I think, have done really well is set up those spaces for workshops and for quiet time, and to just pull yourself away from it. And there's no, why weren't you at that workshop? If you want to go
No.
and just take half an hour to yourself, then go and do that. And that was really nice as well, to have that option. because it can be a really overwhelming day. And I think you've got to have that. And that was another positive that I definitely found.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and we've really taken on board that feedback this year as well. So we've got a new venue, which is like much more spacious. Some of that thing around noise, I think that's going to be better
Yeah.
managed table because it's going to be smaller tables. So even though there's a lot of people there, you'll be able to connect with people like in much smaller groups. And then the workshop spaces, there's going to be several workshops throughout the day where, yeah, you can choose to go to them or not. But that's another opportunity to be in like those smaller groups to connect with people rather than being like last time it was predominantly one big room, which when you get that many people together is a big noisy space.
Yeah.
So, yeah, taking that on board to do something differently with that this year too. Last question from me then, I suppose, is there anything else that you think people should know, or if there's anyone hesitating to get their ticket to come along, what would you want to leave them with as a parting message?
I think that it's easy to say don't be intimidated because we're all intimidated by something. And I was a little bit at the time. I remember because I'd only really just started getting into my LinkedIn stuff properly and following lots more people in the HR world.
Yeah.
And I remember
Mm.
Kirsty Bags Morgan led a breakfast little meetup before the day started. And I got there and I was really early because I'm always really early to everything because I always think I'm going to get lost, especially in London.
Yeah.
And when Kirsty walked in, I remember thinking, oh, it's Kirsty Bags Morgan. She's, she's like LinkedIn famous. And I, like if you haven't been to these things, you can follow people on LinkedIn that are consistently posting and doing all of these things. And there'll be loads of people like yourself and like Kirsty and loads of people like that that you think, oh, they're so much more successful than me or cooler than me or doing all these things. You will sit in a room with all of those people and they will be absolutely lovely and you'd
Yeah.
be just like a normal person because they're
Yes.
not big scary people. So I think the thing for me would be don't be put off if you see some big characters or people that you've been following for a long time going to these events. That's a good thing because you can actually go and have conversations with those people and
Yeah.
learn from those people. And since then, I've been to Kirsty's events, and there's lots of other people in the space that all support each other. And actually, once you get past that barrier of intimidation, it's really nice on the other side.
Yeah.
Everyone is really nice and everyone is really supportive.
Yeah.
And you just never know where those conversations might lead you, whether it's looking for a new role or if you are a consultant and you're in that space. There's just so many doors that can be opened by networking when you do it well. So I think that's what I would say is take that little bit of a jump off the diving board and try it. And it might not be for you, might not be for everyone, but actually you might get a lot more out of it than you thought. And I've definitely now I would pay more attention to smaller independent events like this one than I probably would some of the more formal conferences, just because I know what I will get out of the community that goes to things like the HR Big Meet. So that's probably the last thing I would say.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for giving us all your time and sharing your experiences. I really,
Anytime.
really appreciate it. Hopefully you've been inspired to come along to the Big Meet or at least head over to the QR code at the top here to take a look, get your ticket, to come along, see what is possible for you, again, with the support of a brilliant community like Alison has talked to.